All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you are doing well. We might have a few more people just trickle in here, but we'll go ahead and kick things off. So we're excited to have you join our kickoff of a series this spring, where we leverage on our team's industry expertise to bring some additional insights for you and your team, so that you can maximize the use of Salesforce as well as Enrollment RX. So today we're super excited to be having our colleague here, Mark Farrell, who I've had the pleasure to work with for quite a while, kind of kick things off and talk about customizing the Salesforce experience. So prior to Mark introducing himself, there's just a few things I would like to share in addition to that. So first of all, if you have not met myself, my name is Matt Palmer. I'm the Director of Client Services here. I've been with Enrollment RX about 5 years. I've done a number of these webinars, so you may have seen my face before, but I'm happy to have some other kind of experts on our team chime in. So I'm really excited about this presentation today. So a few just quick things. One, this will be recorded and shared on our RAD Navigator. So if you want to go back and review any of the content today, you'll be able to do that. And secondly, that gives others on your team perhaps that you might think will find benefit from this an opportunity to review it as well. And before we take a deep dive on this topic, what's great about today is it's really going to be very tangible. It's something that you and your teams, as you use Salesforce, can walk away and get really quick wins and really talk about how you can maximize the user experience of using Salesforce. So if you're an admin or if you're a director and you have end users using the system or professors or whatever it might be, how can you really tailor this to be specific to the specific end users in your system? So Mark's going to do a great job kind of walking you through that today, giving you lots of great tips and tidbits around that. And so we're excited about the topic. And before I let Mark introduce himself, I will just say personally, I've worked with Mark about 4 years now, and he's one of the most knowledgeable people on our team. So I'm very, very excited that you get to hear from him and his user experience. So Mark, with that, I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of kick things off.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. That was a very nice build up. So I hope I can deliver here to this group. But like Matt said, my name is Mark Farrell. I've been with Enrollment RX for about 3.5, 4 years now. I've been in the higher ed space for over 20 years. And, what I really do enjoy the most about working with Enrollment RX, besides the people that I work with, is seeing how much of an impact our products make in kind of the real world. Like once we finish doing our setup and our configurations and our training, and it's kind of out there and people are using it, being able to hear the stories of how great things are, how easier things are, or how this one thing that used to be such a pain is so much smoother. Those types of things is really what I enjoy. So I hope through today's presentation, I can walk you through some of the ways from a user experience, you can customize Salesforce, not only the way how it is seen by the end user, but also how some of the data, some of the stuff they shouldn't see is there.
Great. And so, Mark, before you jump into your agenda, I forgot to mention two things. One, if you have questions as they come up, please use the Q&A box. I'll be fielding those through the conversation because we will have time for that at the end. And then secondly, there will be a survey that pops up at the end and also via email. So if you would please provide any feedback, it helps us just continue to provide the best content. So I just wanted to make that quick note, especially on the Q&A before we jump in. Go ahead, Mark.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So now that you guys see me, I'm going to actually turn my camera off because it's going to be a little bit distracting for me. But we're going to jump right into now the agenda. So like I mentioned, I'm going to break this up into two buckets. The first bucket is going to be look and feel, and that's going to be the top 3 items in our agenda. We're going to look at building a custom app, customizing the Lightning experience, those pages that make up the app. We're going to talk about record pages and what you can do there. Then we're going to go into data, and data is going to be what information do you want the end user to have access to? And this is going to be covered through roles and profiles, record types, and object and field level access. And like Matt mentioned, after that, we're going to jump into kind of a Q&A session. So as we go through this, if you have any questions, please feel free to use that. Okay, so building a custom app. One way to make sure that all your end users have everything you need in one place is to create a custom app. This would allow you to show only the objects and fields needed for a specific profile. You can also customize the buttons and the page layouts so that all the info they need is front and center right where they need it. So with that, I'm going to jump over to Salesforce so that we can get started. Okay, I'm logged into our demo org. I'm in an app that I created before, but just some kind of basic level setting of kind of navigation. On my home screen, if I want to look for my apps, I'm going to click my 9 dots up here on the left, and I'm going to have a list of apps. If I click view all, it's going to show me all my apps here up on top, as well as kind of objects down at the bottom. One thing, if you haven't used it before or even know about it, is that you can click and drag these into any order. So if there's apps that you use quite frequently, you can rearrange them so that they'll show up here kind of on top. All right, so now let's build a custom app. Here's our situation. Okay, the admissions department probably has their own app, but graduate admissions doesn't. They need to see a lot of information that the undergraduate, that they don't need to, they need to see a lot of information that the undergraduate doesn't need to see. So they always find themselves sorting and clicking and scrolling to try to find the fields that they need. So one of our solutions is to build them their own app. If we want to build an app from scratch, I'm going to go over here and click my gear icon, my setup, and I'm going to go into App Manager. And I'm going to click on New Lightning App. Here, we're going to just create some basic details. So we're going to call this one, oops, spell it right. Industry App 1. I'm going to upload an image. I want to use this app's image over the default. And I'm going to click next. Okay, app options. I'm going to leave this kind of standard for now. So standard navigation style. I want this to be supported on both the desktop and the phone. I want to do a setup. 2 options down here. So disable end user personalization of nav items in this app. Once you create this app, the end users are going to have the ability, if this isn't selected, to be able to add stuff to it that they have access to. But they can't take away anything that you put in there. But if you don't want them to even do that, you can disable the fact that they can personalize it at all. And then this last one down here, disable temporary tabs from outside of this app. An example of this is, let's say let's say they click on an education history record, but the ed history is not a tab across the top of the app. Well, what will happen is Salesforce is going to create a temporary tab so that you can see kind of where it is. It's a nice way to kind of just know where you are. Now, I find this extremely helpful, but clearly some people don't, or it wouldn't be an option to turn off. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on and click next. My utility items, I'm going to leave this as default because I'm going to change this when we go into the actual app. But this will give you the default values that you've already set. And now I have navigation items. So I'm going to make this somewhat simple. I'm going to look for a home screen. I'm going to grab a contact. I'm going to grab an application. And I'm going to add ed history. Now, notice here for ed histories, I have two. Now, I know that one of these is the EDA object for ed history. The other one is our enrollment RX ed history. Wouldn't it be great if we could rename these? Well, if you stick around, I'm going to show you how we do that later in the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and add this one because that's the one I want. I'm going to hit next. Now here's where we can assign it to profiles. Now I already created a graduate admissions profile. I'm also going to go ahead and give access to my system admins. And I'm going to click Save and Finish. Okay. Now, if I go up here to my search bar, Industry App 1. All right, now if you notice, I don't have my home screen here. I wonder why. Well, that's because back on my app, when I created it, there were two options and I did not pick the right one. So to go back to that, I'm going to go back into my app manager. And now instead of clicking new, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look for my industry app 1. And now I can edit it this way. And if I go down to my navigation items, we want to go home. This is the one we needed. Now I can rearrange these and I can get rid of the one that I don't need. All right. So now let's refresh the screen. Did I not add it the right way back? All right, hold on. We'll go back to that one. All right, but I have the app here. We'll go back to it in a second. All right, now that we have our new app, we can customize it. So we can edit the home page and we can add the different components that we need. I'm also going to show you dynamic forms and buttons. And I'm going to show you how to organize the page layout and configure those columns that show up in a recently viewed list view and the columns in the related lists. So I'm going to switch back to Salesforce and show you that. Okay. So our homepage, right? So here's just a basic screen. We've got some tasks, we've got some related items, we got a related list down here of applications, we've got a text box with some quick links, but we want to change this up. The graduate admissions needs a different report, or they need something different that's important for them to see front and center day to day. So you're going to see me do this a lot. I'm going to go here to the gear icon and I'm going to click edit page. This is going to bring up our lightning page. So we're going to be spending a lot of time in this lightning page or on similar lightning pages. Now I can delete something. So if I didn't want this quick links, I can just click the delete button and get rid of it. I can reorder the information. So just clicking and dragging and putting it into a different order. or I can add to it. So if you look over here on the left, there are a lot of components that I could add. Now we're going to cover throughout the course of this presentation. I'm going to jump into a few of these, and I'm also towards the end going to call out ones that we're not actually going to use right now, but are important ones that you might use down the road. But you can see you have a lot of options. So in this instance, we want to add a report to this page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this report chart component and I'm going to stick it on the page. Now, on the right-hand side, I can determine which report I want to use to actually bring up the information in this chart. So I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm going to select our tasks here, and I'm going to click Save. I go back to my app. Sorry, let's do it from here. Now I have my report right on the page. Very simple, very easy. Can make a very big impact by just adding a couple of things, moving some things around, putting things that people need closer to the top. Just some very basic, simple stuff that can go a long way. Now, I'm not done yet. So what I'm going to do is this is going to bridge us into our next topic, which is going to be dynamic forms and buttons. So to take this a step further, we're going to add a dynamic form to a record page. So what makes dynamic forms so special? Well, if I go into my contact and I go to page layouts. So for dynamic forms, if you wanted a record page to be different for somebody else, you needed a couple of things. One, you need to have different profiles. Two, you need to have different record types. Three, you need to have different page layouts. So if you have a lot of profiles, excuse me, that means a lot of layouts and a lot of maintenance and a lot of upkeep. But what if you wanted different page layouts for an object that typically doesn't have record types? So for example, the application object. The application object usually doesn't have a lot of record types, as well as the big table, if you use import, doesn't have usually record types. So how do you have different page layouts without different record types? Well, now we have dynamic forms. So here's our situation. Right now, all the applicants, regardless of admission status, have the same record page. But for students who are enrolled, we don't want to display the same info as if they were still applying. So those apps have been processed, they have been enrolled, they're active, so there's no need to take up space on the application record page for some of this information that was really only applicable while they were applying. Now, normal page layouts are controlled by profile and record type, which in this instance, the students are the same record type, but now we have this other option. So dynamic forms is going to allow us to reorganize that Lightning record page and treat it like a regular page layout with some limitations, which I'll share after I show this to you, but the benefits definitely outweigh the limitations. So I'm going to go back into my app. And now here, I'm going to click on Edit Page. This is going to bring up my app record Lightning page. And from here, I can click down into the details section. Okay, now notice in the top right corner here, I have a gray box. It's telling, excuse me, it's telling me I can configure a record detail page and my fields right inside the Lightning app builder. It seems to know exactly what I'm looking to try to do. So if you've never done this before, you're going to see this gray box and you're going to see it's going to say upgrade now. I'm going to go ahead and click upgrade now. Now this is just giving me a splash page of telling me how wonderful that this new feature is. I'm going to click next. Now it's going to ask me which form do I use as my basis? So I want to use this one, the current one I'm doing, and I hit finish. Now, if you look at this section, it looks a little bit different. And along the left-hand side, I now have some additional options. So let's say, for example, now that they are an enrolled student, we don't need to see the payment section anymore, right? It's not needed. It's needed for while they're applying, but it's not needed now that they're an active student. So what I can do here, I can set, now I have this, I can set my component visibility inside of here to then put a filter so that I cannot display this given I'm going to use admission status, but you can use basically using any type of filter. So I'm going to just say add a filter. I'm going to use admission status. And I only want this to show if it's not equaling active. So now I'm going to say this. And now we did this, excuse me, based off of the admission status of active. So here I have somebody who's active. Hold on one second here. Oh, sorry, guys, this didn't.
Hey, Mark, just to chime in, when you make changes in Lightning, it gets cached. And so sometimes it requires a log out, log in to see that change live. So that's probably what's happening here. So we're not going to make you do that, but that might be the particular reason that change didn't happen yet.
Yeah, sometimes it took me a couple of times when I was going through it for it to stick, but you can see how now you have options that you didn't have before, which allow you to set visibility on not only sections, but fields. And it's a great way to be able to customize the page without having a multitude of page layouts to sift through. Now, we can do this with sections, we can do this with fields. We can also do this with buttons. So let's say, for example, superclone, for example, right? Maybe during the admissions process, or during the application process, any changes to term, program, things like that are going to happen on their current app, right? Because they're not an actual student. But maybe once they become a student, then they're going to, then you don't want to touch the existing app. You're going to, clone, and you're going to create a new one, and then you're going to change that one. So you really don't want the undergraduate, or you don't want somebody to change you don't want somebody to super clone if they're still in the, up to kind of say admit status. So we can do the same thing with buttons. So I see it here in my top highlight panel. So if I edit this page, and I click in here, I see my same kind of upgrade now, right? Because now I'm going to do this again. We're going to go ahead and just migrate existing what's there. We're going to use our application layout as our base. Now, you'll notice here, I have my buttons that would be across here and including down to my little caret, all listed here. Now I can do the same type of visibility. If I click into this guy, so super clone, I want to add a filter. I'm going to go to admission status. This one, I want it to I'm just going to say if it equals it. All right, so now if I go back, we have our applicant, which, what status is he in now? He's active. See, the button's gone. So there, now that I'm admit, I've got the super clone button. But if I wasn't in admit, this is a very loose filter, but you can do it for all the statuses. But now if I was started app, or let's just say up to that status, now that super clone button's not there. So now I can not only do it on sections and pages and fields, but I can also do it now on the highlights and the buttons up there. I mentioned some limitations of dynamic forms. I'm not going to read through all of these for you, but we can post this link as well. But just some of the highlights as far as, I guess, notable things. Right now, dynamic forms only works with custom objects. So it doesn't work with standard ones. It's not compatible with IE 11, which, people are kind of moving away from that anyway. It doesn't support blank spaces. So you know how when you create a page layout, you can put in blank spaces so that you can move fields around to kind of line them up. You can't use blank spaces in a situation like this. So everything would be in like one column or two column, kind of all flushed together. And then lastly, which I don't know if anybody would ever do this, but there is a max 100 fields per column, just in case you wanted to get crazy. But so, excuse me. So to kind of summarize, we learned two different ways to customize the look and feel in a situation where using page layouts and record types isn't an option. So like I said, I think the benefits of being able to do something like this outweigh kind of some of these limitations, because you'd be able to get what you need done without having to use kind of record types as a differentiator. All right. So moving on to a new topic, another way to customize the user experience is through the page layout. So let me jump over to my education history object. If you notice, I'm brought to my recently viewed list, and it has a little pin next to it. So that means for me, this is my pinned default list view. Now I can change my list view and I can change my pin so that when I leave and come back, it's going to be on whatever I pinned last. But let's say for this recently viewed, these columns are nice, but they're not exactly what people would need, because they constantly have to drill in to look for like those one or two fields. It'd be great if what they needed was just right here. Well, instinctively, you might go to this gear icon thinking, oh, I can select fields to display. However, it's grayed out. So this one's just a little bit trickier as far as where it belongs, where it's changed. This is actually changed in the backend object itself. So if I go in here to my gear icon again and edit the object, now I come down here to my search layouts. And before I click into my default layout, you'll notice I have all of my profiles. So now I can set a default, I can set columns based off of profile if I wanted, or I can just do, they'll all be here in the default when you start off if nothing's been set up yet. And let's say we wanted to know their GPA. It'd be great if just GPA was sitting there. So now I make that change and now I have GPA here. So again, something simple, something small, but if it takes away a click because somebody has to go into the education history object just to see one field that they might be able to just see right here, I mean, it's great to be able to just do that. All right. Another place where we can configure columns is going to be in the related list section on a record. So let's go back to our application. Here was Carl. Kind of got lost out of his app. Sorry about that. So this layout has our related list kind of on a separate tab. But if we kind of look around down here, we have our education histories. But notice here, it'd be nice if the GPA that we put back on the other page for Ed History was listed here. So I didn't have to click into here to go to Ed History to look at it. I'd just be able to look at it right from here. Now, this one, again, it's a little, it's in a little different spot. So we're going to click on the gear icon and go to Edit Page. Now there's more ways, there's more than one ways to get to it. I like to go to this way because as I'm previewing it, it's going to tell me what page layout I'm in. If you know the page layout you want to go to, great. But if you have multiple page layouts, I go this way because it's going to tell me which one I'm previewing so I know which one I'm changing. So if I come in here to related and I look down here in this section, it's going to tell me here previewed. I'm previewing this application layout. So this is the one I'm going to go in. Now I can scroll down or I can click on the related list section here and come down to education history. And I can click my little gear icon or the wrench, I guess, next to it. Oh, GPA is here. Okay. I just have so many things. You can't, it's not going to display them all, but same mentality. So I would come down here, I would find the fields that I want and move them over. And given the size of that, I guess the real estate that you have to work with, even though I have 8 or 9 fields selected, it's only going to show me 4 or 5 just based off of the amount of space I have to work with. So I'm just going to bump that up and save it. Oops. And there we go. Now I have my GPA column here. So you can do that for any of these. So anywhere you have a related list that's tied to it, you go into the page layout and you can configure in column, you can configure any of these columns. All right, so those are the places where we have column configurations. So now we're going to jump into something else. Another nice thing to add to a page, or what we would call quick edits. So this allows you to update a related record from a related object on the original page. So what does that mean? So let's say, for example, once an application is submitted, the admissions counselor works primarily off of the application record. But there are 1 or 2 fields on the contact record that they update frequently. So instead of going from the app, clicking on the contact, opening it up, then editing the field, then saving it, then going back to the application, I can put those 1 or 2 fields from the contact right onto the application page record and edit them right from there. So in our situation, we are working with the application. So we're going to start here. And I'm going to go to our edit page, which you are all too familiar with by now. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another component and drag it onto the page. So in this instance, I'm going to look for the related record component, and I want to put it right there. Now it's going to default to the record you're on. So it's going to show my application details. But if you look over here to the right, you can see I can edit my lookup field. So instead of use this application, I'm going to select the applicant. In this situation, the applicant is the contact. Now, if you look here, I have a second lookup option. So this way you could drill down even further if you wanted to from something else. We're not going to get crazy. I'm going to leave it as this contact, but you can see how powerful this could be using this related lookup, is because you can look up to a relationship of a relationship if you can get to it. So I'm going to click done. Now you'll notice here, I've got some basic fields, right? But if you see, like, there's nowhere here, you can't change them here. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. Right now, we just got to get it on the page. So we've got it on the page. I'm going to save it. Okay. So like I said, these fields are great, but these might not be the ones I want to update. So to update them, this place, it's a little tricky, but now this section here, if you notice here, update action, right? We're going to update because that's what we're doing. We're putting the contact fields on the application record. These aren't lookup fields or formula fields that we might put onto an application record just to display information on the page. These are actual contact fields now that are on the application page that we're going to change directly from the application page. So we are updating a record. So this is the action that we're updating. Now, in order for me to change the fields that we want to update, I have to go into the action. So I'm going to click here, view and edit action. Now that action that we had was called update. All right, so I'm going to search for update. Here it is. Now, if I click edit layout, here are those fields, right? So we don't need phone number in there. We're not going to be changing that or doing anything. I don't need to do the email address. Contact stage is the field that I actually do want to update. And I don't know, let's just throw something else on here from the citizenship status. Now, if I go back to Carl, now I have my Carl. All right, well, the email piece was gone. But from here, now I can actually update the contact record directly from the application page. So again, something I mean, I know if you're seeing this for the first time, there is some steps involved with going through it, but you can see how adding just a couple of these fields that people would probably use more frequently into the page that they work on more frequently, you're able to cut down on clicks. You're able to make it just a more streamlined kind of process that hopefully people don't get lost. They don't, get sidetracked on stuff. You just put everything right there in front of them, right exactly where they need it so that they can do what they need to do in the most effective manner possible. All right. We're going to talk about another component called path. You've probably seen them before. A little bar across the top that kind of shows people maybe the stages that somebody's in, or showing them as they progress kind of across through a process. Typically, we see this on the application. On the application, you usually see a path that's like showing them, inquiry, app started, app complete, admitted, great. But let's say you wanted to do that on the contact, right? We have contact stages. So why not build a path on contact stages? Well, we can. So, excuse me. Once again, we go to edit our page. And if we look down here, we have this component called path, right? So I'm going to put it up here. Now, if you've never set up a path before, there's going to be, well, here, you know what? Since I have one on my contact, we're going to do it on the app. So I'm going to show you guys to do it from scratch. So we're going to add path to this, and we're going to do admission status. Okay, I have one here too. Sorry about that, but all right. So we're going to go into this. Okay. So when you create a path, if you don't have one already created, it's going to ask you to create one. When you go and create one, you're going to name it. You're going to select your object. In this instance, it's going to be application. We're going to select a record type. We could select, we can have a different path for different record types if we want. And we're going to select which field we want to build the path off of. So in this instance, we're going to do admission status. But if you want to build a path, you can also just build a field. Like you can build a pick list field that you could use for the path. After you determine what field you're going to use, it's going to give you all of the options across the top here. Now, what's nice for each step along the way, not only can you click on it to show completion and to kind of move forward, but you can also add fields to the step, and you can also add guidance for success. I like how they call it guidance for success instead of like description or something like that. Because it allows you the opportunity to put in information that's not just a description of this field or what's the status means, but you can put in what they should do at this stage. So like, for example, like started app, if I wanted to say guidance for success, make sure they complete the app by the deadline. Or for submitted app, we can say, make sure they complete missing docs, right? So you can help facilitate what they should do at each step, not only just to check off the box that it's done, but there's also a good opportunity for training to make sure everybody knows what to do next, right? So now and I can do this for all these steps. And then finish, right? So in this instance, I want to make it active, and you can enable celebrations. So who doesn't like digital confetti all over their screen? So I'm going to say like obviously our goal with this is going to be, let's say for admissions, like complete app, right? Once the complete app is done, that's it, right? We want to do this always. So I can see my other paths I have here. Sorry guys, I'm getting. Did not save my path. Sorry, 2 seconds. Okay, now that I have my path, so if I move this little caret down here, now here is where that information that I added while we were creating the path is gonna live. So here I can make sure there's missing docs. There wasn't any ones there. But what did we say? Complete app was our success. So I'm going to click mark that as. No, I don't need that. And voila. Woohoo. All right. So again, path is a good way to visually represent where something is during any sort of status progression. And you can create it based off of any pick list field, and you can put it, I mean, I don't know if you'd need it on every object, but obviously contacts, apps, leads, we also see it on a lot, are good places to have them. All right. Okay. A couple of more components to go through before we get over to the data side of things. Accordions versus tabs. Okay, this is a good one. So let me go over to application. Let me get this out of the way. All right, so accordions and tabs. Accordion tabs work similarly. I mean, they work the same. The biggest difference is how the information is displayed. So right here we have tabs right across the top. But another way to display it is up and down like this, and have what they call the accordion style. So what I want to do is kind of leave this alone. I'm going to add the accordion style right below it, so you can kind of see apples to apples, the difference between the two. There is no right or wrong. It's just a matter of kind of preference and maybe the information you might want to display, but it gives you a good idea of other ways to organize the information. So over here, right, I see this is my tabs one. But if I want to, I'm going to add an accordion below it. Now I am going to use some of the same ones up here so you get an idea. Requirements. That's all right. Mm. Let's see if it's going to let me do this here. Even though I'm getting these errors, I think it's still going to let me save. All right, now I got to put something in here. Where is it? All right, I'm just going to add that in there for now so you can see the difference. So in this instance here, we've got our tabs across the top and then these this way. Down here with the accordion, we're going to have them just basically like this, right? Without the tabs across the top, but we're going to have this vertical up and down. Again, no right or wrong. Basically look similar, but just two different ways to display the information. All right, let me jump over back to here because there's a couple of components that we don't have in this demo org that I wanted to talk to you about. One of the components is this engagement history. Now, this is for Pardot. So if you have Pardot installed, then you can add the Pardot engagement history component onto the page and it will display the engagement history. So across the top image is kind of the back end view that you would take that component engagement history to drag it onto the page. And then the image off to the right is what it would look like on the page layout. So there would be a section for engagement and you would have kind of your emails and things like that that were sent out of Pardot from there. Another component that you might use either because you're creating a new page or maybe you hadn't have it on the page before is the quick access panel. So the quick access panel is a way that we kind of pull together all the admissions documents and things like that and display them on the application record itself. Typically when we do our installations and setups and configurations, they're always there. But if you were in an older version, or if maybe you, for some reason, you want them at the time, but you wanted to add them back, then the component to add the quick access panel back onto the page is this checklist requirement quick access. So we call it, the quick access is just kind of towards the back of this. So it's really checklist requirements to keep an eye out for. So if you take that component and drag it onto the page, then it's going to pull in those checklist requirements onto the record page. Couple other ones. So now I'm kind of a long way around circling the wagons back to, wouldn't it be great if we could rename that object for education histories because I have two of them? Well, there's a couple ways that we can do it. Well, there's a couple places you can rename something. So one of them is this translation workbench. So through the setup menu, if you put in translation workbench and you go into override, it's going to bring up all the different packages that you have installed. Most of the ones, obviously from us, you're going to see the enrollment RX. You're going to have core, different packages there. We can then select custom fields, we can select our object, and then it's going to give us a list of all of those fields that are part of our managed package. And you can click into the field label override column. So in this instance, let's say we use the word applicant, but you want to use the word student. So you can drill down into applicant, click into the field label override, type in student, hit save, and now anywhere applicant was showing before, now you'll have student. There's also rename tabs and labels. So here's where, again, so for example, let's say you use the EDA application, but you also might have the custom application object. And if you have core, you get our ERX custom application object. So to avoid confusion, you might want to relabel the two app objects that you're not using and maybe put, parentheses, do not use in front of it or behind the object name. This way, when people are searching, it's very clear for them which ones they should or shouldn't use. So in this instance, with our education history, we would then just put do not use in front of the one that we're not actually using, so that this way there's no confusion which one you should be adding or using. Another way to help out is to add custom help content. So not only can the help custom content be used to describe a field, but can also be used to direct somebody on what to do. And in this instance here, we add it into the field itself. So let's just pick on this object. So if you edit any field right here, help text. So here's where you can update the help text, and it will show on the page with the little eye, and you can hover over it and show it. All right, a couple more. So there's two things I wanted to talk about as far as lookup fields go. So you can put filters on lookup fields. So in this example here, let's say we have a custom lookup field called academic program that's on the application object. So this field looks up to the account object where the programs are stored. Now, without any filters, if I was to change somebody's academic program on their account record, and I go into that field and I try to search, I'm going to get every account that there is. And in my account object, I might have educational institutions, I might have other companies, I might have programs, I might have, who knows, I might have a dozen different record types for my account object. Now, that's not helpful for somebody who's trying to change a program or do something like that. So inside that field, what we would do is we would add a filter. So we would say for this field, which is academic programs, I want to be able to just narrow it down to just a record type of academic program. This way, which is the image on the right, if I go into my academic programs and I start typing, I'm only going to get programs. I'm not going to get any companies or anything else that might start with an S or an O or a C. It's just going to give me what I need. So again, if you have lookup fields, take a second and go through them and just make sure that when people are trying to search with what they're looking for, that if you can narrow it down so that they're not sifting through a bunch of information that they really don't need to see. And it's just slowing the process down for them to make an update. All right. Lastly, as far as just overall look and feel and everything. So Salesforce has some guidelines, right? So these are kind of buckets where they have, clarity, efficiency, consistency, and beauty, right? All this comes down in my eyes, is familiarity with the end user. So if a page looks consistent, items are called the same thing from page to page, buttons are roughly in the same location on the page, and anything erroneous that they don't need to see is left off the page, then it will be easier for the end users to navigate and find out what they're looking for. So again, and this link too, we can post, so you can go into each one of these in more detail if you want. All right. So that was look and feel. Now, these last couple of slides I have are going to talk about data. So roles and profiles, object and field level access, and record types and pick lists. If you're not using roles now, or maybe you have a very flat role structure set up, I would offer for consideration, taking a look to see, is it working what you have now, or do you have areas for opportunity? Because one thing that roles will help you control is what information people see, what data people have access to. Now, if you set up roles in a hierarchy, then people below will not see access to the people above. So this is great for roll-ups. This is great for reporting. This is great if you have, teams or silos of teams that are by department or by program or by region, whatever the case is. You can set up a hierarchy of roles so that the counselors or the reps that are in a particular side of the org chart there won't see information across them or above them. So it's a great way to kind of limit what they have access to see. Now, as far as profiles and object and field level access go, I'm going to go over and show that to you in Salesforce, because this is going to be a little bit easier. So if I look at my profiles, right? So if I go into my start and I search for profiles, right? I'm going to get a list of all my profiles. If I click into my profile, here's where I can control what objects they have access to, what fields they have access to, what tabs they have access to. And again, it's a great way to kind of pare things down. Because again, like let's say you have right now just one profile for everybody in admissions, right? But everybody doesn't need to see the same thing. You actually have undergraduate admissions, you have graduate admissions, you have student workers, you have contact center reps, whatever the case is. And not everybody needs to see all of that. So if you have these profiles set up, then I can come down, and this is a really long screen, so I apologize seeing this scroll, but I can, here's where I have access to my field level security, right? So I can go into here and I can select which fields in this particular object I want or don't want them to have access to, and whether it's going to be a read access situation or an edit situation. I can scroll down even further, and I can't actually edit it this way. I have to edit from the top and then scroll all the way back down, but I can check off the objects that I do or do not want them to have access to, which I'll get to eventually. So now I can set that same profile for each one. And then the same thing with tabs. So up here, I passed it. You can default on, you can turn off different tabs so that they can't even get to the tab itself. So some of these are hidden, some of these are on. But again, you can edit all of these. All right. And last but not least, we want to talk about record types. And I want to talk about more specifically record types and pick lists. So let's say you have an object that has multiple record types, right? I'm going to use contact, for example. You have lots of record types with contact. Now, with each of these record types, we might be sharing or using the same fields, right? Maybe for, and this is, I don't say a bad example, but like country or status or things like that, where it's the same pick list value across all record types. But certain values of that pick list aren't really applicable to every single record type. So instead of having just a field for a particular record type, you can control what pick list values show up based off of that record type. So if I am, let's say, other ERX, other contacts, it's going to bring up all of my pick list fields. So this is every pick list field that this record type has access to. And if I click into edit, now here I can move back and forth values that I might not want them to have access to. So one, this can cut down making people, giving people options to select something that's just not even applicable given that record type or that situation. So it just kind of cuts back on things that could potentially be done in error. But another thing to keep in mind too is if you're adding pick list values to a field, there's that screen, and let me just, when you add the value back, when you add a value, it's going to ask you which record types do you want to associate this value to. And a lot of times people don't scroll down to the bottom of that page to see that, and they just click like next. Then they go to look for it and they don't see the value. If you come here, most likely you'll see it sitting here in available values that just needs to be clicked on and moved over. Okay. I know that was a lot, and I've talked for a really long time. So I am going to grab a sip of water and I am going to switch back to our presentation because we are now ready for our Q&A session.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark, for all that detail. There's lots of good content there. And we did have a few Q&As that I have answered, but as I go through this, if any other kind of questions have come up, feel free to type those into the Q&A box. So one question that was asked by Teresa was that if you have existing page layouts for an object, would switching to dynamic forms basically replace all of them? And you certainly can chime in too. My understanding is I don't think that it would. It is kind of a global setting once you do enable it. And the other thing I just want to mention there is that dynamic forms are specific to custom objects right now. So contact and account objects, for example, would not be available at this time. I know it's on the Salesforce roadmap as it's a Salesforce feature, but any other custom object, including ours, like the application object, could be that can be enabled there. So if you do after this session try to go into the contact or account, you won't see that as an option, and that is intended right now. But I know that with every release, there definitely is a roadmap for that. And I also would encourage you that on the Trailblazer community, which is just the general community of Salesforce, there's actually a group specific to what they call dynamic forms, and that might be a good thing to be plugged into as well. So the next question that came in from Gisela was, can a lookup component be used to look up a contact's user account and see things like their active status to the portal? So Mark, you certainly can chime in as well, but my understanding is unless there's like an actual lookup field, you couldn't see their user record, but you could see their associated like administrative account if you wanted to see that. But seeing that lookup to the user record itself, I don't think is possible. I mean, there's a button that would take you there to see that on the page layout, unless a custom kind of lookup was built. And you could always explore that like in a sandbox or something of that nature. And then finally, Jim asked for path. Can you reorder the values at the top of the page, or can you hide values? So my understanding, and Mark, please chime in here as well, is that for path is actually based on the order of the pick list. So the pick list that you have showing, I think, is what would control that. And I don't think there's a way to actually hide certain values other than using like kind of different record types, like Mark was just showing here at the end. But Mark, feel free to speak to any of that as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's pulling the values directly from the pick list. And I don't think as I was going through my path setup, it gives me an option to not use a value. So in that instance, then you might want to create a different field specifically for that. Because I don't think I have I didn't think I saw an option to be able to not use a value. I think it automatically pulls them all in.
Yeah, it does allow you to specify a record type. So if record types are being used for a record, I think that could help control. But other than that, it's just all the.
Yeah, it's pretty much all or nothing unless, yeah.
But I think that would be a good suggestion for Salesforce and their roadmap. I think that would be helpful for sure.
Absolutely.
Great. I think those are all the questions and answers that we had, Mark. Kind of give people a last minute here. But outside that, we can kind of transition to the last two slides. So just as a reminder, we have our RAD Navigator available to our clients. And so this here has things like our webinars that we have done and things specific to our kind of setup with our products. But in addition to that, we do have FAQs. And one of the FAQs is actually something that Mark just referenced, where it's like, all right, well, I have a pick list, but I can't see a value. And I know that value is there. Well, it's probably because it's not added to the record type, right? So small kind of helpful tips like that we have as part of this as well. And if you want to transition to the next slide, Mark. If you are not familiar with Enrollment RX, we have a few guests with us. Essentially Enrollment RX is what we call the RAD solution, where we provide kind of a holistic approach to recruitment, admissions, and decisions, and a lot of the out of the box functionality. So certainly you can reach out to us on our website if you have any further interest or want to see a demo. And go ahead, Mark, to the next slide. And again, we're all native Salesforce solutions. So everything is built on top of Salesforce. So everything you saw today, it was actually Salesforce. It just is integrated with our functionality as well. And we have, Mark showed you custom apps at the beginning, how you can customize that looking experience. We have, pre-built apps in that way as well, where you can get to what you need using our product and functionality. And if you want to transition to the next slide. So if you'd like to learn more, here's the contact information that you can reach out to us. And then upcoming, we do have a couple of other exciting webinar series coming up. So the next one will be, so they're always going to be the third Thursday of the month. So the next one is March 17th with Katie, and she's going to be presenting on Pardot and marketing for higher education. So if you are not familiar with Pardot or are using it maybe a little bit, Katie comes from a university where she used Pardot and is a Pardot consultant as well. So that will be very insightful. And then on April 22nd, we have Matt Tate, who is an integration consultant. And this is a really, I think will be a really helpful session where, it's very common for higher education to have common imports, things like Common App or ACT or SAT files. And how can you effectively kind of streamline that process to get that data into Salesforce? And Matt is kind of a specialist on that. So that definitely will be a great session overall. And then finally, data governance in Salesforce with Paul Chacon. He's a senior implementation consultant. Maybe you probably worked with Paul, but he is one of the most knowledgeable members on our team. And he is really going to take a deep dive on how you can share and protect your data in Salesforce. So some of the things that Mark covered today on, roles and profiles and visibility and managing your data, effectively, Paul's going to cover those topics. So certainly we'd love to see you at all three of these upcoming events. And I think that's about it. So again, at the end of this session, you will see a little pop-up. Please provide any feedback that you have. You'll see a survey. And if you can't do it right away, you will get an email as well, where you can provide that. So again, that just really helps us not only continue to provide you the best content, but also other ideas that you might have. So, we do these webinars, we try to shoot for once a month. And so if there's a topic that you would love to see covered, after we kind of finish this series, we definitely take that into serious consideration so you can get the most out of the use of our products in Salesforce. So thank you everyone very much for attending today. And thank you, Mark, for a very detailed and thorough presentation. And we hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.